we have a huge number of people who we sort of support now, a huge number of schools. This math is, it was quite greedy actually. We were just all over it. We're supporting over 1,500 schools now, which is really amazing. The feedback we get from that is what makes our support even better. And webinars like this is only our second one for SLT. It's really important that we talk to you as an audience and we hear how we can help you to support your departments. So on that, at the end of the webinar, there will be a little poll to say whether or not you think this is useful, ongoing for yourself and for similar colleagues. And we'd really appreciate you just taking like 20 seconds to fill that in. And then post webinar, there'll be a more detailed follow-up about some exciting stuff that you can get involved in, which I'll be outlining today. No spoilers yet though. So a little intro. I'm Faye Shepherd, lead practitioner for maths at Sparx, working on all things maths and more recently knee-deep in the Sparx maths curriculum, which launched recently, which is really exciting. And I'm in the process of talking to lots of heads of departments about their implementation plans for that from September. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit today later on. So if we just head towards the agenda and we can sort of see what we're going to be looking at today. So we're going to be starting with Hannah, who will talk about Sparx impact reports, which is really exciting. Then we're going to have a guest appearance from Amanda Whitehead, who will talk about how we can support maths departments from an SLT point of view, specifically for post-paper 1 GCSE, because we've got this weird gap that we don't normally have. Normally the maths paper 1 is this week and then we go straight into half term and then we're straight back into it after half term. But actually there's been this kind of a lag, I guess, between paper 1 and paper 2, which may or may not be a good thing. We shall see. But as I say, we're all in the same boat. And the third one is a detailed look at an exciting baseline project, which we've got lined up for year 7 for September. But on a wider kind of remit around that is some work on the curriculum that's happening, which you may or may not be aware of. And hopefully I'll get to tell you a little bit about that and hopefully point your heads of departments my way if they want to learn more. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Hannah. Hannah, do you want to take over? Do you want me to move your slides on, whatever's easiest for you?
You can just, if you don't mind moving my slides on, that would be lovely. Thanks, Faye.
That's fine. Thanks, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah, and I'm part of the school success coach team here at Sparx. I successfully used Sparx as a head of department in a school for 3 years, and I love it so much. I now work here, which I'm very happy about. So I've been working as part of a team on producing some exciting new reports for schools. Next slide, please, Faye. So why we made them? Well, as a former head of department using Sparx, I found the data is amazing, but sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, and especially as SLT, you want that snapshot of what is going on in my school. So we've made these reports to be a one-stop shop of very pertinent information to encourage discussions around Sparx Maths and its usage. Yes, please, Faye. Just one more bullet point. Thank you. We've also got this quite exciting element to it whereby we're including, because as Faye said, we have so many Sparx schools now, we're including data against the 5 most similar Sparx schools, and that's contextually similar to give that comparison as well. So let's have a little look at what they might look like, well, currently look like. So it starts off with some a sample at the beginning of the report. The aim is for everything to be useful. It could be a quick celebration, but also sometimes a chance to delve deeper into the data and agree some actions moving forward. So one of the graphs for the next slide, Faye, is on something on active working time. So that's where you can see this comparison between similar schools, your school, which in this case have the same median, so maybe I could have picked a better example, and also the high usage schools. So, and then with impact and discussion points. So again, the whole aim is to drive a discussion between yourself and the head of department around how it's being used, what else could be used going forward. So as motivated and engaged members of our Sparx community, because you're all here, we'll be sending most of you an impact report following this. We really want this to be as useful as possible. So we ask for you to take some time to have that chat with your head of department. And then we have a feedback form ready for sort of iteration 2 to go for September, so that these are as useful as possible for you guys. Yeah, so similar means it's part of the we've got it in the appendix, but it's to do with the DFE data. So similar in terms of pupil premium numbers, similar in terms of just catchment area. So it's what would, I mean, we based it off of the FFP similar school to have full disclosure, but just of those who use Sparx. So yes, it's in beta mode, so we may not have a report ready for you, especially if you are an international school, so please hold tight if that's you. But if you are lucky enough to get one, if you wouldn't mind filling in that form, that would be really useful. Thank you so much. Any more questions at all? Cracking. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hannah. Really appreciate that. I think these are going to be really helpful, and so it'd be really great to get some feedback on them when they do go out. So it's time to go back into sort of a GCSE world, and most of you here, I assume in some capacity, either lead maths in terms of senior leadership capacity, or embedded within the maths department also. So we hope this will be a useful insight into what Amanda does at United Learning. So United Learning Trust now supporting nearly 50 secondary schools. Amanda works nationally across these schools with a team of other advisors. And so the support that they put together obviously is substantial because it impacts so many schools, and they all use Sparx as well. So on that point, this is actually a really good person to hear from as well, because actually you've also got the Sparx Vision stuff that you can lean on to. And Amanda won't go in detail about that. She's really looking at, here are some like key nuggets that can help you sort of help your department through the next couple of weeks, which can be quite stressful. So Amanda, I'm going to pass over to you. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you've been busy back from another conference to join this webinar, so I really appreciate you being here. And yeah, giving your insights on how you're supporting your schools at the moment.
Thanks, Faye. Hi, everyone. Thanks. So yeah, like Faye said, I'm going to try and give you a bit of an overview as to what our general advice is always to our schools in the run up to exams. So I'm going to firstly talk about sort of every paper and how we ask schools to prepare for every paper, and then looking at the gaps between paper 1, 2 and 3, and how we can maximise the knowledge that there's a set amount of maths curriculum, and actually when something's been tested in paper 1 or paper 2, we can be quite confident in sort of crossing that off the list to help narrow pupils' curriculums further, so pupils' revision further and further as you get towards that paper 3. So if you could go on to the first slide, Faye, that'd be great. And I'll just talk through some sort of first top tips. So this is what we would always talk to our heads of department about in terms of getting ready for every paper. And this is probably something that's applicable to all subjects. So obviously it's really important that departments understand when their drop-down days and afternoons are, and that's been thoroughly planned out. So I'm presuming that all of you as schools have got set revision times for year 11 between the exams based on what is the sort of what's the curriculum time available before the next maths exam, and maybe maths would lose pupils if there's an English exam, and English would lose people when there's a science exam. But that can all be quite complex. And so the first thing is just making sure your heads of department are really clear on the time they've got and how long they've got. And then talking to them in some detail about what they're doing. I think it's quite easy to, when we think of revision, it's sort of, okay, we'll go through a past paper, or we'll get pupils can come along and they can ask questions if they want. And actually that's not the best thing for the pupils. We need heads of department to have really carefully thought about what each individual class needs before that exam. So if they're able to have all their teachers with their classes, great, but ask your head of department, what are they doing with their class? And if the head department doesn't know, then they need to know. They need to go back to those teachers and find out exactly what they're doing and make sure it's targeted so that it hits key gaps. If you've got the whole cohort together, then it's really important that your heart as the expert in the department is pulling together those big ideas and sending out, sort of thinking about what I guess like a briefing for year 11, where these are the key things you need to think about, not doing exam questions, not doing big mark questions with them just before the exam. It needs to be, right, okay, do we remember how to solve linear equations? Can we convert between standard form? all the sort of your sort of bread and butter of maths, I guess. We want to fill them with confidence, so we want to make it accessible. And I think having those conversations and checking your heads of department have thought about that before these intervention days is really important. Front of house. So by front of house, I mean, who is the first person that the pupils are going to see when they walk into that exam hall? We know that maths can be quite anxiety inducing for pupils. I mean, exams in general, it's a big thing for pupils to go through when they're 15, 16, and there's a lot of them now. So who knows these kids? Who's been in the school for a long time? Is that the head of department? Is it the head of year? Is it SLT? Is it the head teacher? Who wants to be the one welcoming them in and making them feel comfortable in the environment? What we don't want, or we often say at United Learning, we don't just want these invigilators that don't know the pupils being the only ones they see. They need that reassurance, that familiar face to sort of smile at them. Like little things like making sure invigilators are wearing trainers and not high shoes, so they're walking around the hall, they're not making noise and distracting people. All those little things add up, I think, to make a big impact, and the way pupils feel when they go into the exam is really important. Having staff around if possible. So if you can ask your head department to ask staff to come in early on the morning of the exam, not to do intervention, but again, just to be there, just to be in the canteen or the hall or wherever it is pupils are gathered before the exams. Again, just that smiley, familiar face. You've got this, I've worked with you all year, you're going to be fine. Only nervous pupils that do need that a bit of reassurance and want to check those last few, what do I do if I see this question missed? They've got their teacher to go to. But again, informal, not sort of teaching the morning of the exam. And then logistics, so the equipment. So just making sure that your head department has checked with the invigilators and the exams officer that they have exactly the equipment that they need. And that could, so things like, for example, if in lessons they've only found measured angles using half protractors, do they have half protractors on the desks, or is it 360 protractors? Because that's going to throw pupils and they're not going to be sure how to use them. Making sure pupils know that their calculator's in the right mode for paper 2 and 3, so that's after half term. If they go into it in radians mode and they start trying to answer questions, then they're going to get gobbledygook answers. They're not going to know what to do, and they can't ask when they're in the exam, and we can't help them fix it. So make sure their calculators are in degrees mode, so that there's a little D at the top. That's all you need to ask them. Just, is there a D at the top of your calculator? And if there isn't, put your hand up quick and get the team to go around and fix them for them. Having tracing paper on every desk, so they're not having to raise their hand and wait for it. All those little things that are just, really important that your head department has a handle on. And then for this year particularly, obviously the formula sheet, and making sure to remind pupils where that is in the exam paper, and that it's there to support them for all of their papers. Okay, Faye, go on to the next slide, please. Okay, just saw that comment. Very good. Okay, yeah, maybe don't phrase it like that. So paper 1 to paper 2. So we've had paper 1 last week, and yeah, this is the biggest gap. We have 2 weeks, like Faye said. We don't normally have this amount of time, and so we've had what we know Wednesday, so we've had half of the time so far. Predicted paper 2s are out there. There's links on this slide here to some that we've sent out to our heads of department this week. Faye will send this out obviously at the end of today's presentation, so you've got those. Again, it's just about please going back to your heads of department and say, what are you giving pupils over half term? If it's just some past papers, okay, fine, but are you also sending them back with the predicted paper 2 for this series, where people on these websites have gone through and said, okay, well, rationalizing the denominator has been tested, surface area has been tested, what else has been tested? Tree diagrams has been tested. So all these things come off kids' original list. They don't really need to look at them again. It's probably not going to be tested again. And so you can help to focus their revision. So if you can get these into people's hands before the half term and tell them to do these over half term, please do. Both papers will be calculator. So again, just making sure kids, I'm sure they do, but just making sure that teachers have spoke to the kids about them being calculator papers, and then it's sharing those expectations with parents as well, and saying, these papers are coming home, the expectation is these are completed, self-assessed by pupils, and maybe brought in after the half term to make sure they've been done. I'm sure loads of your schools will be doing intervention sessions over half term, so it might be that some of these are held back and used in intervention sessions with pupils, or given to them at the end of that intervention session. So that's really important to make use of this big gap, and we've still got 2 weeks from now, because it's the Wednesday after half term, so we've still got 2 weeks of time to let them to get them doing even more revision. And then finally is sort of if you go on to the next slide, please, Faye, is looking at thank you, paper 2 to paper 3. So paper 2 is on the Wednesday back after half term. Paper 3 is the Wednesday after. So less time, but messaging should be exactly the same. The logistics of the tighter turnaround, I think, is something where you can maybe have the biggest logistical support for your heads of department here. I won't say regularly, but in my time, I've heard about schools being told that they can't get the predicted papers printed and given out to pupils because the reprographics team just don't have capacity to get that done. And I just think that's completely unacceptable. We need to forewarn our support teams that we're going to need this amount of time to pull through whatever your cohort size is of exam papers to give to pupils between paper 2 and paper 3. Again, you think that narrowing of that revision list, the last paper's the one that's the most predictable. Now, because the paper's on the Wednesday, the predicted papers probably won't come out till the Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. And on the Friday, all your pupils will be in the biology exam in the afternoon. So what you need to do is find your predicted paper 3, again, use the links that are on the last slide, make sure time's blocked off with reprographics to get that through. So there's no problems there. And then I know the kids are probably not going to appreciate you giving them a maths paper as they walk out of their biology exam, but it's the time you're going to have them all together. And so with a smiling face, your team need to be out there, or SLT, heads of year, form teachers, whoever, giving them these predicted paper 3s and saying, right, well done on biology, but now go and do this paper over the weekend, and it's going to prepare you for your final maths paper on the Wednesday. And again, sharing that expectation out with parents. Your child was given a maths paper to support with their revision after the biology exam today. Please support them in completing this over the weekend. Just a text message home or an email, however you communicate. And I think that can be really powerful. And otherwise, pupils by this stage are in lessons in dribs and drabs, and you just won't have the impact of getting that revision material out to them. So they're my top tips, Faye. I hope that was useful. If anyone has any questions, they're more than welcome to contact me.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. That was really helpful, particularly the tip around the biology exam as well. That's a good insight there. Are there any questions that anybody has for Amanda now? More than happy to take a couple if there are. Otherwise, we will move on, and yeah, you can wait for the slides to come around after this. Okay, fab. Yeah, thanks, Danny. Yeah, it was really helpful. Appreciate your time, Amanda. I know you've had a really busy day. Hopefully you can stay on the call to hear about the baseline assessment project that we're going to talk about next. So kind of switching gear a little bit now, I'm going to talk about year 7. I'm going to talk about year 7 in September. So it feels like a long time away, but there's an existing assessment package that Sparx provided last year, which provided a year 7 baseline assessment and some follow-up resources, which helped close gaps in knowledge. And these were all static resources. And it was really well received. It was one of our most downloaded resources that we've had so far. We don't know the actual reach that we had with schools. We like to believe all those downloads led to this assessment being used. But what we really want to know is actually, is assessment having an impact? And actually, can we make the work around the baseline assessment more productive for you as a school? So we started an exciting project, which I want to tell you about. So we're rethinking what we're doing around revision and assessment. And I say we, I just think as a set of professionals, having been in schools and working in schools as an advisor and seeing QLAs used a lot, I will be the first one to admit that I'm not the biggest fan of QLAs. And the reason why is because I think they look great and they feel great and we're all using them. But my worry is that what do students actually do with them afterwards, and how can we follow up on what students are really doing following that QLA? So I love the prospect of what information it can give us, particularly around year 11, particularly around end of year exams, and particularly around baseline, because that really gives you that jumping off point into the topics you're about to teach in year 7. So how can we help students to actually use these reports really effectively and monitor how they're doing? How can we help teachers close gaps in student knowledge and help their workload? So following the assessment, what does a teacher do? Do they go through the assessment with their classes? Do they try to give them repair work? Try to take that into mark, try to monitor the progress following it? And that's all a lot of work, and it's a lot of work if we get it right as well. And then also on the flip side is pre-assessment. Like, what can we do to support revision? Now, revision is like one of the hardest things for students to do, and it's one of the hardest things for teachers to facilitate. What is good revision? You know, I've thought about this since I started teaching. You know, how can we effectively get students revising? What is good revision? How can we make it so it's not overwhelming? How can we monitor it? How do we give them enough but not too much? So we really want to work on that bit as well. So this is an exciting project for us. We're starting it around a Sparx Maths curriculum. Now, some of you, or hopefully most of you, will be aware that we've just launched the Sparx Maths curriculum that's starting in September this year. It's a 5-year sequence curriculum available for free for year 7 up to year 11 with supporting resources, ready for year 7 and 8 from September. So that's my curriculum plug. But what we're going to start looking at is how we can improve assessment and revision as part of this curriculum project. So we're going to start with the baseline assessment. So we're going to start to try and provide a transparent revision program for students. We want efficient data entry where we know that the data is being entered quickly and efficiently. We want to provide really helpful reports, so kind of similar to what the static reports were looking like, but actually with some national benchmarking in place as well for those schools that take part. And also we want to look at what's the effective follow-up work to close gaps in fluency. So all of these things, plus problem-solving gaps, are big things around pre and post-assessment that we're going to be looking at. So what are we doing? We're already working on this, and actually the first part of this has been completed. So in product now for Sparx schools, for the baseline assessment in September, any school using the baseline assessment who is a Sparx school can input their assessment results in the online platform, which looks and feels exactly like the spreadsheet you're used to inputting data in, or your teachers are used to inputting the data in. Some of you might also use them if you're maths teachers too. And then it will produce those reports for students, classes and cohorts. So it will give them weaknesses and strengths on the fluency and problem solving skills across lots of different topics, and give a question by question breakdown. And that's all available in the platform. This will all pop out really nicely, and that's kind of a inbuilt package that will be available for that baseline from September, and then ongoing also to support the Sparx Maths curriculum. And then a wider piece, which I'm excited about, but we need to get it right, which is year 11. Like, how can this bit support year 11 as well? I'm particularly interested in how we can support year 11 mocks, knowing how difficult it is to get secure papers now, and actually think about how we can support revision and follow up for that. But there's another part to this, which we're working on right now, which is the follow-up work. So once they get that report and they've got the question by question breakdown of how well they've done in every single question, and they've got a Sparx topic code that they could go off and look up independently, do they do that? It's a lot of work. There's a lot of questions there. I'm not convinced they do. But it gives them something. But we're going to generate bespoke work for students. So a package for students to go and work on following the assessment to help them close gaps in fluency, first of all, and then a wider package around trying to help them close gaps in problem solving. And there's not really such thing as a gap in problem solving. It's just being better at problem solving, which probably means getting a better grasp of fluency and then having practice at lots of problem solving questions. And then also comparisons to other schools, so national benchmarking on any school that participates. Now, if the number of downloads of this resource for September for the baseline correlates with the number of schools using it, that's a lot of schools. So we really think we're going to have a wide pool of schools here using this assessment, and you will get those comparisons there. Now, moving forward with the curriculum, this may or may not be part of the Sparx Maths product. So we want to trial it in September with our Sparx schools, like a free trial. We want anybody who's interested in this to let me know. I'd be delighted to sign up like hundreds and hundreds of schools to use this, so we can actually look to see how effective it will be and if it's worth exploring other avenues like year 11. we're going to have a quick look at what the follow-up work looks like, because I think that's, for me, the really exciting bit. Now, the QLA in product is super exciting. Don't get me wrong. End-to-end data, great. And it all pops up in that lovely spreadsheet and it's really satisfying. But this bit here is what I think could be a bit of a game changer post-assessment. So on the left is effectively the pupil report that they would see statically, and that would be in product. So that's what a mock-up looks like right now. And these are mock-up images, but it would look something similar. They'd have a question, what unit it was covering, the topic code relating to Sparx, the question type, i.e. is it fluency or problem solving, what mark they achieved, and the opportunity to go and fix up that question. And if they start to fix up the questions, they're taken over to this screen here, where they'll get a shadow question. And what I mean by that is effectively the same question, but with different numbers. And they get to fix up their fluency first to try and close those gaps in knowledge with supporting videos for every question. So this could be done independently, like at home, if you've got a very engaged school in terms of completion rates for homework, so they're already well engaged in the platform. Or I can see this as a class being in the computer room following an assessment, and they log in and they're able to go and fix up their assessment. And for students who then fix up all their fluency, they'll get the monitoring page that they can follow, which will say, you know, continue fixing up if you've not done it yet. They'll then get to go and have an opportunity to go and practice that problem solving area that they weren't very effective on in the assessment. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the intention around the QLA in product. And we'd really love it if Sparx schools would be able to test this with the baseline assessment in September. We're reaching out to lots of heads of departments at the moment about this. I'm reaching out to lots of trusts. We have a trust network that incorporates about 400 schools at the moment, and I'll be reaching out to them at a conference in a couple of weeks to get as many of those schools as possible to use this as well. And I think then following that, we can really show kind of a power of what it would look like to have this in product. Just touching on what the reports could look like. So we did a little test trial of this last September where I approached around 50 schools to participate in providing us with their data. Obviously, that was quite a laborious project because they had to send us their data physically, because this will all now be in the platform. And they'll get a benchmark of where they sit against all the other schools nationally. And when we say national, we're talking about all the schools who will use this assessment. We'd be very transparent about how many schools that was in the project. And then they'd get loads of information. And I'm not going to show all of it to you, but just some headlines here. Topic performance on fluency and problem solving compared to national, kind of what the differences are, kind of what things stand out. How did your school perform in each question, and gives you kind of some really high performing question performances here against the national performance, and then below some questions which you haven't done so well on. If we can fast forward to where we sit in terms of GCSEs, this is crucial because it's all about how we perform against other schools when we're trying to get our students to where we need them to be. And then how do classes perform? Really interesting, because this, why have we got topic strengths in this class and maybe not in other classes, and why is this class not performing so well here and another class is? So ways for heads of department to dig deep into those class areas too for their school. I think, the only assessment we really get this from, bar like GL assessments, etc., is the GCSE. And then it's kind of the end then, that is the exam that we're all leading up to. I think this gives us an opportunity to get something useful like a summative assessment along the way, and actually give some type of idea maybe of where your students are sitting next to other students as well. But more importantly, the bit I'm most excited about was that follow-up work there, and actually making something purposeful come out of a summative assessment for students, as opposed to a mark and where you're sitting in your year group and your cohort and nationally. Actually saying, okay, now's a chance to actually go and get some things wrong, but like get them right again now. So that would be quite an exciting project to see what it looks like, and we'd love your feedback on it. Now, I've seen questions pop up, so I'm going to try and answer them now. And if I have time, I'll mention the curriculum. But really, the most important thing I wanted to talk to you about today is this project. And there's a poll that's been launched too, which I mentioned earlier. Please complete the poll. And I'm going to start answering a few questions. And if there are any more, please feel free to raise your hand. That's absolutely fine, or pop them in the chat. And I'm just going to finish off by giving a little sort of hint at what the curriculum, how you could find out more about the curriculum as a school. So there are a few questions here. I'm going to start with Greg's question. So is the bespoke work built into a homework task? Great question. This is going to sit away from homework. The reason for this, there's a few reasons. One, we don't want them to have additional homework tasks. I think the homework task is substantial and it runs alongside the curriculum of teaching. We don't want it to be interrupted by assessment fixing up. Assessment fixing up would be quite a short, snappy task. Something that will expire quite quickly. So probably something that's done in the week or two after the assessment. But also we don't expect 100% completion on assessment fix-ups. It will be a case that maybe some students will be able to fix up 8 out of 12 of their questions, and that's okay for the context of their class, particularly on a baseline assessment, which is a single assessment, it's not tiered. So for those reasons, we're going to have this as a separate kind of route away from homework for now. But it is, something we'll monitor. Our senior leaders having a presentation. All of this presentation will go out after the meeting, and yes, heads of departments are being offered to have this information as well if they reached out to us about the curriculum. The assessment should take place, I say should, in inverted commas, obviously when it suits you, but typically as soon in September as possible. It's a baseline. So it's essentially, what do they know from Key Stage 2? What are the gaps in their knowledge? How much damage has that gap between Key Stage 2 SATs and September, kind of what's that created? So as early on in September as possible. That really gives a jumping off point to impact teaching of topics moving forward from there. There's wider things, obviously, that it can be used for around like rank order, etc. if you want to. I mean, we won't provide grade boundaries because there's no purpose for that for the assessment. So a few more questions. Yes, so is the QLA going to be available for the Sparx curriculum for all of the assessments? Yeah. So this project is hinged around the Sparx maths curriculum. But as I said, there's a wider bit around year 11, like how can we support that, particularly with mock? So it's just a thread of thought at the moment, and I'm going to get some feedback on what that could look like moving forward from the Trust Conference next month. And assessments online is a really good question, Rachel. We talked about this a lot. The assessment could be online in theory. We could make it so they're like 1-mark questions throughout. We could make it so we can adapt it in that way. However, there's a couple of things. So one, students are still going to do written exams and they're still going to need to do a written exam in the near future. We don't see that changing very quickly, particularly for maths. Even if we get to a point where they're digital, I think it would be more of a case of a transitional kind of period where maybe students are using writing note, iPads, etc., for it to load into a system. We're a long way away from entering solutions online. So we don't want to sort of pull that away from that opportunity where students can still write maths. Secondly, there's a logistical issue around that, making sure you've got the expectation of schools to all have a computer room to do that assessment all at the same time. So we just don't want to put that pressure at the moment on schools, but we're always thinking about it because we know how much workload that would save in terms of it uploading immediately into the system. So kind of watch this space, but at the moment it's a no, but there is a future where that will happen. And the baseline assessment is the same as last year, Amanda. And I think, have I missed any questions? And it won't be linked to any other curricula at the moment. So this is a project centred solely around the Sparx maths curriculum and the baseline assessment, purely because of the amount of work that goes into making sure that follow-up work is bespoke and it works well for those classes. So there's a lot of work that goes into generating that follow-up work. Okay, and yeah, the baseline assessment. So Danny, I'm trying to interpret your question. Let me just read it. Hang on a second. So do you picture the baseline questions being more atomized, so drilling down to microschools, or stay in the same style-based one you released? Yeah, the same style that we released this year. That's kind of what we modelled this project on for now, but we'll be reviewing that to see what type of assessment is the most effective one for a baseline assessment. And I'll get your thoughts when you come to a conference too on that. That would be really great. So I'll take one more question, and then at the moment, no, Claire, but this is not something that isn't impossible in terms of technology at some point. But at the moment, we're working on it supporting the sequence that's associated with the curriculum. So not at the moment, but we never say never. The main thing at the moment is, and I think that leads on nicely to this bit here, which is the final bit just before just before we finish, and hopefully maybe even a few minutes early, is the Sparx Maths curriculum. Like, we've spent the last 12 months working on this and developing a sequence, that runs across 5 years. It's been a really exciting project and really refreshing to be able to step back and map out maths for the next 5 years. And we've launched it. We've got 10 years behind us now. We've got 50,000 questions in our resource bank. We've got 1 billion question attempts. All of this stuff has led us to the point where we can write a really effective curriculum and supporting resources. Assessment is a big part of that. Like, our assessments go through a rigorous process of difficulty level to ensure that they are able to reach out to students of all abilities. So we want to now try and support teachers in the classroom, and it hinges around like core principles. And one of the main things I talk to teachers about is empowering teachers and giving them a really effective toolkit to be able to plan their lessons. So we're not overwhelming them with a huge amount of stuff to begin with. We've got the sequence there ready. We've got the assessments, the resources, some teaching resources for the classroom, which have been really well thought out, closely linked to Sparx Maths homework. Great balance between fluency and problem solving, which is critical. And we're going to listen to the feedback over the next 12 months and see what else would be helpful. Now, as senior leaders who, like most of you are here, and if you think your HOD, your head of department or your director of maths would be interested in knowing more about this, and they just need to register on sparxmaths.com/curriculum. They will also probably have had an email or a notification to say it's launched. And I'm running calls at the moment with heads of departments. And in those calls, are only calls with 5 heads of department at a time. So they are quite personalised, to tell them more, tell them how it could work in their context, but also to invite them to be part of the baseline project in September to trial that new QLA and product in the Followup Work. In the Term 1 assessment in September, we'll also be launching the revision part of that programme, which will be revision online too, and there'll be a bespoke programme for students to use as well as part of the curriculum. So if you think your head of department would be interested in talking about that, and obviously it aligns directly to homework because the templates are already uploaded, you can press go on that and it will give them an hour of retrieval practice every week. And then, yeah, just get them to reach out to me. There's a quick form that's going to come around afterwards on email, a quick survey. And it just asks you, would you like to be contacted about the baseline assessment project? If you just pop yes, then I'll have your contact details and I'll get in touch. And from there, maybe I can get your head of department contact details. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me directly. And I should have popped my email address on the last slide, and I'll do that now. So the final step would be the feedback poll. I was going to say it again, if you haven't done so, please. And a survey when it goes around afterwards would be really great. If you've got additional feedback about these webinars, or you want to sign up to the baseline project, then let me know. And here's my email address. If you want to reach out to me, then please do so. And I will get back to you. So we have got 5 minutes, and I'm more than happy to give you 5 minutes back of your very, very busy time. Or if there are any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, I'll pause for 20 seconds and then I'll say thank you to everybody. Really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks again to Amanda for joining us after an extremely busy day. Much appreciated. Good luck to everybody in your schools for paper 2 and all the other exams that they've got. It's been great seeing so many of you here today, and have a lovely restful half term if you can. Stuart, the links will come around on a slide, so you can have them directly after the webinar. We'll send a follow-up email with all the links that were shared by Amanda's. Hopefully you'll get them then.